committed to those ideals as things move on. And in the youth space, that's extremely important because youth graduate and leave and go other places. So you want to have an organized base that can keep the campaign going. Also, it's important because those same youth, if as long as they're really organizing, then they even become those awesome organizers who then become John Lewis, right? So I mean, like John Lewis was a young person out there doing some work. The work of Ella Baker. I think we should all educate ourselves on the organizing that young people have been doing for a long, long time, and not discredit the current moment because maybe there's organizing here and not there, but to just encourage those involved in the current moment to actually organize and to sharpen themselves with one another.
All right, that is really good. So I hate to kind of stop the moment there. Very well said. But we're going to have to take a short pause, a little technical break, and we should be back in 2 to 5 minutes at the most.
Yeah, just keep us. Suhad, put up the screen on the stream, I guess, and then All right, Caden, I think we're live now.
All right. We are live. Yeah, looks like it. So thank you guys for bearing with us with our technical difficulties. We're still pretty new to this. We're kind of figuring out as we go. So of course there's going to be errors along the way, but I'm happy for you all for sticking with us. And we're gonna try to get a productive little conversation out of this. We will probably cut them together and put a big super cut up because of the disruption there. But thank you guys for sticking with us, and we're going to get right back into it. So we were just talking about activism and kind of actual activism versus like political activism versus, what was the word that you used? Performance activism. And that was a really cool conversation that we were having. Would anybody else like to touch on that? If not, we had a question, but it's whatever.
Yeah, I can hit on that. So I feel like it's also that just the conversation in general is just it takes away from what we really do need to focus on, because I'll be real, like I've had this conversation with so many different people, and this tends to be a very issue I'm seeing a lot specifically within Generation Z. And I think one aspect is that like Tyler was saying is like there's been organizations doing this for decades, and it is the responsibility of people who are wanting to do something to try and connect and find those organizations. However, it's also not easy due to that lack of technology and platform for really being able to know one space. But I also think that like we do always have to just bring back this aspect of people are wanting to get involved. They might not do it the right way the first time or the second time, but we need everyone. And as long as they're willing to learn and listen and move along forward, once we realize where we're at, then it's okay. But I do just personally am seeing so much more of this just divisiveness, this cancel culture, and what that's doing is really making this, I don't know, it's taking this movement into a lot of different ways, and in a time where we really, really need to be in a collective and moving towards fast radical change. So that conversation itself, I've just been having so many of those that I've just been like, listen, as long as you keep your intention true and you learn, and if you make a mistake, you apologize and you're sincere and you move on.
All right. Once again, very well put. I think we have two questions from the live chat, but they're pretty similar to each other. So Mila, if you'd like to do that.
Awesome. So both of the questions are kind of, the same. But Angela Chen asked, there are a lot of cities that currently have cut down some funding for the police, but do you guys think that the cuts make a big enough impact? And a similar question was, would defunding the police be a national movement carried out by the federal government or determined by each state?
I can answer at least that first one. If we're saying like defund the police, then like okay, then like that's what I meant. But like for me personally, like I'm not saying that. I'm saying abolish the police as a whole. I'm not saying just take money from them, but like get rid of that system as a whole, because I don't want people running around with guns, with barely any training, like on the streets. I mean, even looking at the history of police officers, knowing that the initial first police force that was used in American history was slave catchers. It was when slaves would run away and seek freedom and stuff, and then they had these slave catchers who go and find them and catch them and bring them back. That's the whole point of why police were brought into this system in the first place. So I'm not saying just defund the police, because that's not enough. That's not enough by any means. I'm saying police abolition on a whole level by bringing in people and putting that funding towards other things that can actually benefit the community, not just guys or girls or whoever walking around carrying guns, antagonizing the Black and brown communities.
I second that. I'm also an abolitionist myself, and want people to understand that abolition isn't simply about erasing one thing and then having everything else stay the same. We're talking about abolition of the prison industrial complex. So many things point to prisons, like the school to prison pipeline, like the way we do traffic stops, even, the way we conduct searches, immigration and deportation are also looped into this. The child welfare system, the way we push youth into group homes and criminalize them when they're in the group home, the way we almost encourage individuals who have had contact with the system to then re-enter the system by placing individuals on probation or certain programs, certain quote-unquote diversion programs that really just ensure that you're going further into the system because you have to admit guilt to enter the program and not have something on your record in the first place. When we talk about police abolition, we talk about the destruction of a system that was built up, to Victoria's point, to oppress Black and brown people and to prevent their ability to speak up and have any sense of self-determination for themselves. To say defund police is a step toward abolition, and many places have taken that step. And that's where organizing is important too, because now we're going to ask for another step and another step. You have districts like in Oakland and like in Denver, and many other places, Milwaukee, who have removed police from schools, and now there's an implementation phase within that. But we see police-free schools and ending the police brutality and the targeting of students as one step toward abolition. We want to break down this system, this carceral state, and build up something that is hopeful, that is transformative. It's all about how do you treat people. That's it. There's a common sense element to abolition. Does putting someone in a cage help anyone? Does spending billions of dollars and profiting and actually profiting off them being in a cage help anyone? The answer is yeah, it helps those who actually profit off of it. It helps those who are overtly racist or even implicitly racist or who don't want to speak up when they observe racism. It helps maintain a status quo that has been in existence since slavery. So to be an abolitionist is to say that you are brave enough, courageous enough to envision a society where putting a human being in a cage is not okay and will not be tolerated. So defund is a step toward that. And as long as the things we demand are steps toward abolition, then you know that I'm on that team.
And I definitely third that. I think we have to recognize that this isn't just going to be fixed with defunding. We really have to reimagine what this looks like. I think we've been so stuck that like we need cops, and if we don't have this, we're not going to have any law and order, that it's really kept us from even imagining a society where when people, you know, if somebody needs help, they're not just thrown into literally like the worst types of conditions possible, and recognize that it goes all back to capitalism, and that this is all about money, that most prisons are privatized. And I mean, even for me, like how it even impacts locally is when I ran for mayor, one of the candidates' husband was the top fundraiser for one of the worst private prisons in this country that is currently making gajillions of dollars off of detaining immigrants and with their detention centers. Actually, one of the detention centers in North Carolina has been condemned by the UN for breaking human rights, which was within that candidate's husband. So you also then have, you know, like the entrapment of the FBI. You have our, you know, Raleigh City Police chief training in Israel. All of this is, you know, it's an American pandemic, but it's also a global pandemic. The way we refuse to think about the fact that, like, you know, nobody comes out of prison. Most people go back because of the horrible treatments and how it is. I have a brother who's been in and out of the system, and the just it's just been very difficult to see how we just have lack a complete like moral narrative in this country in terms of like, you know, we rather criminalize someone sleeping on a bench rather than finding housing for them, right? Like we're putting money in the wrong areas, and this isn't like, you know, an accident. It's about money. It's about control. We have to recognize that these are bigger issues than we realize, and that the government as well as the 1% doesn't want to do away with prisons in the criminal justice system. So we're going to have to really think about it in a way where people can see how much better our society would be if we just had morals and didn't think it was okay to throw kids in cages, and now we're just normalized to it, and that's what's happening. So this is it's a problem that has to be addressed by, like we mentioned before, politically through technology, but also just morally, spiritually. Like we've got to add more humanization of people into this conversation.
Yeah. This is definitely a good conversation. And I would like to just very quickly, we're running a little low on time, but it's okay if we go over because we had a short break. So it's okay if we go over a little bit, if that's all right with you guys. So what are some police alternatives that we could use instead of the system that we have in place now? Obviously, that's a big question, but if anyone would like to tackle it.
Yeah, okay. I just I think it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think a lot of times it's funny, I was like watching TV the other day with my family, and they had this like Trump commercial come on, and it was this like little old, like poor little fragile like white like grandmother, or like lady, and like she was like trying to call the police, and like it was like she was dialing 911, and it was like, we're sorry, like the police can't come to the phone right now, like da 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 da, like we're not available. And it was like, this is what happens in Joe Biden's world, like da 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 da, making it seem as if like there's no alternative other than like these people, you know, like the police. And I think it's so funny that they use that as a tactic to kind of get people's minds thinking like, oh my gosh, like we can't defend the police, we can't abolish the police because there's no other way. But it's like, knowing our history, like we're always looking to change things. We're always looking to find if one thing doesn't work, we'll find another way, another solution and stuff. And so I think even coming about police and stuff, whether that be, I know for at least for the aspect of schools, and the fact of, like I said before, the whole school nurse, school psychologist, school counselor situation. I mean, that in itself, taking that and looking at that issue from a broader standpoint of like people in like just in the world, just, you know, becoming an adult and, you know, kind of living on your own, that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, well, if we can get to the point of, okay, someone, this person has to rob another person, or has another person at gunpoint. Okay, how did that happen? Maybe that person felt there was no other option other than to rob someone else, because they have at home, they have 2 kids who they're trying to feed. They have a wife who maybe is, you know, working a 9-to-5 job, who they barely have any money as it is in order to pay their bills, not even mention feeding their kids and stuff, and clothing their kids and giving their kids, you know, the things, these simple necessities that they need and stuff. Maybe they can't even get a job because they might have a criminal record from their past, before maybe they got a small charge for marijuana, so now they can't even get a job to even help provide for their family. So it's like, people want to talk about these big issues of, you know, robberies and murders and all that kind of stuff, but it's like, why did that person feel the need to do that in the first place? If we can get to the root problem, if we can nip that in the bud, then it won't go off and become all these crazy things. We're all human beings. All we want to do is live and breathe and be happy. But when you take this from generations upon generations, when you've taken things away from us to where we have nothing else but, you know, to go and sadly rob someone else and still steal food, or do all of these other things that we don't want to do but we have to do, then it's like, well, what do you expect is going to happen? So I think that there are a lot more options other than having people walk down the street with guns. You know what I'm saying? Like, if we can start from the root problem and have, you know, more social workers, more psychologists, more therapists, more availability with that kind of stuff to really get in with people and the different issues that we're facing and stuff, then we wouldn't have to worry about robberies and killings and homicides and all of this other crazy stuff.
I second that. And to you meet people's needs. The prisons are full of individuals, just like Victoria was saying, that weren't doing these drastic things we're talking about. Our carceral state is predominantly people who were put into the system for things that none of us on this call would say they should be locked up for. The system is funded by locking up people predominantly of color for things that no one would agree that needs to happen for. So meeting people's needs, and then the creativity that Zainab mentioned earlier. People need space to be creative, to figure out alternatives, to both make mistakes with those alternatives, learn from them, and then improve them. This system doesn't work. So to say, well, what else are we going to do besides doing the thing that doesn't work? Like that's an illogical argument from the get-go. They said the same thing with slavery. What happens when you just let a whole bunch of people go and they're just going to be walking around? Like, that's not practical. They said, and so then they brought in Jim Crow. And then they said the same thing with integration. But what are you going to do when you got a black kid and a white kid sitting in the same classroom or swimming in the same pool? Their world's going to end. No, it's not. It doesn't end. It's the current power structure requires policing and prisons in order to maintain itself. Capitalism requires you to lock somebody up if they get too close to your property, if they disrespect your property, if they're not in the right area. We have to look at things, I think, systemically and look at things in the lens of the prison industrial complex. And when you look at it like that, you realize that all these things play into each other in a way that makes it so that abolition itself is talking about reimagining our current conditions. And I know we're near the end. I'll just shut up with that.
All right.
The only thing I want to mention to that is that the United States has the largest prison population in the world, and that we have the highest per capita incarceration rate, and that we prison parole and probation operations make almost $81 billion. It's an $81 billion annual cost to U.S. taxpayers, and they make another $100 billion from phone fees and things that people need to buy in prison that are paid by individuals. So in a country like China that has 1 billion, 2 billion people, I can't remember at this point, and they have less of a population in prison than us, we need to look around the world and see what other countries are doing and that we're not.
All right, yeah. And this is a great conversation we're having. I'm going to ask one question to wrap us up. We're at 5 o'clock. The weekly web activist again asked, they said abolishing the police and refunding other parts of our community, if done, will have results that will take a long time, maybe even generations to see. How do we keep people on the right track and moving forward through years of fighting for the same process? And how do we convince people to start or continue the journey when immediate results may not be seen?
Organizing clearly doesn't involve immediate results. It involves people struggling together. So I can be short. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm sorry.
That's all I had.
Biggest thing is like one thing that kind of took me about.
Okay, Victor. Victoria, we can't hear you.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm back.
Okay. I'm totally agreeing with Tyler's point here, and that not only do we need to make sure we're focusing on building our communities, but we also need to make sure that we're focusing on building ourselves as people, because I know that it's really hard where people are like, you can't see the immediate impact. This is a long fight. Like, that's what it is. There's nothing else. It took a lot of years and centuries to get to this point, and it's going to take hopefully not as long, because we have technology, to overturn those systems. And we can't dismay the fact that we're going to have to fight really hard, which means working really hard to be disciplined, to, you know, nourish our bodies right, to meditate, to figure out how we stay in this fight and we don't let ourselves get burnt out as well as get hopeless. Because, you know, at the end of the day, we do have a lot of privileges than other countries that we're seeing around the world, where you see children fighting because they're getting bombed each day, or the children in Yemen dying because they don't have food in a world where there's so much waste and that's happening. But people are fighting, and they figured out to keep fighting. So really, we just as not only as a generation, as a country, we need to build more resilience, and we just need to keep going and organize.
Yep. And Victoria, we could try one more time to hear you. I know you're having technical difficulties, but if you want to try one more time, that'd be great.
Oh.
Hello.
It's okay. I just typed my answer.
All right. So Victoria said it took her a really long time to realize that essentially this is a long fight, and it will continue to be a long fight. But that does not mean we cannot let up, because literal lives are at stake in this fight. We have to realize this is not about us, but about our future generation. So there you go. Well said, everybody. If no one else has anything to close with, we're gonna go ahead and say some closing remarks. All right. So thank you guys for viewers for coming to our panel. I hope you learned something from our changemakers. I know I certainly did. We had such a good time. Our mission at SLAC is to increase student involvement in government policymaking and to catalyze real-time political action and impactful change. I think I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that you being here today and us having this conversation, maybe we accomplished our mission just a little bit, and that's a huge win, I think, for all of us. Another huge thank you to our changemakers for coming out. Remember to follow our socials, which are in the description. You guys, is there anything you guys would like to plug?
Yeah, you can learn more about YAP at youngamericans.protest.org, or follow us on Twitter, YAP_agent, or Instagram, Young Americans Protest. Young Americans Protest.
All right.
So I would encourage youth in particular to get active, like you all are doing, to join SLAC, to join Wake County Black Student Coalition, Education Justice Alliance right there in Raleigh. If you're in Durham, check out the Youth Justice Project Durham. So YJP Durham is, I think, the Twitter and the IG handle. We're looking for youth who are also trying to get down so that we can have a Wake County and a Durham County police-free schools fight that's joining together as we go into this 2021 school year.
I also just want to add Raleigh Pact, which has been doing policing work for the past 5-6 years, as well as Raleigh Demands Justice, Refund Raleigh, and Emancipate NC, as well as our reps.
All right. Thank you. And of course, Victoria is leading the Wake County Black Student Coalition. You can follow them at WCBSC. Follow all of those accounts and follow ours for updates on issues like this and how and our solvency and others. So thank you guys for coming. We had a good time. We got some big talking points discussed, and I hope everybody learned something. So this discussion was great. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Bye.